Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is ZXRyuu. Today we're going to be continuing our equipment journey, I guess. So we're going to be talking about splitters today and some matrix stuff, and as well as VCRs and just some other entry-level splitters and maybe some things that are a little bit higher up on the scale. So anyway, I hope you enjoy this video, and let's go ahead and get started with just some entry-level splitters, just some things that you can buy that are BNC and RCA and S-Video, and then we'll talk about VCRs and then the big Extron matrix switcher there at the end. So let's go ahead and get rolling here. Okay, so first of all, we've got just a little BNC splitter. So it's BNC on this end, the male end on this end, and then it's got the female end on both sides here, so you can see that. And you can attach little BNC to RCA adapters like we talked about last time to this, and you can split the signal in two directions. I don't really use this thing very much, but I did want to bring it up because it is just kind of a basic level BNC splitter that you can attach to either like your PVM or something else in order to split signal that way. A really basic entry-level splitter is something like this, where you have one RCA input on this end, and then you have two RCA outputs on this end, so you can plug in your console into this end, and then you can split it into your TV and your capture device or another TV using things like this. So this is just a little Monoprice adapter. And then if you want to, that's for... you can use this for composite and component as well. If you have 5 of them, you can attach all of them to the Y PVPR and the audio connectors, and then you'll have a splitter for all 5 channels. The only thing that I've noticed about these RCA splitters is they're pretty good, but they do sometimes have a tendency, depending on what type of TV you're connected to and capture device and stuff like that, that it can make your picture quite a bit darker. You might have seen that in some of our latest videos, like the Naruto Clash of Ninja 2 video. Redo was a lot darker than normal, so we used these splitters, and I didn't know that was a problem until that video actually in particular. So that's something to be aware of. It's really nice and easy to split it. I'll show you how to use them here in a little bit. And then if you want to do something with S-Video, I found this little Extron MDA SVA 3 SVA, sorry. So it's an MDA 3 SVA. And it has one S-Video input on it, so you can use that one, and then it's got 3 S-Video outputs to it. It also has this connection down here on the bottom for audio. This is called Phoenix, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on when we're setting up audio splitting as well. So because there's some ways you can connect audio to these things as well and route video and audio to 3 separate sources using this box. So I really like this little S-Video adapter, or I guess distribution amplifier is what it's called. It's really nice for just getting a basic S-Video cable and then having 3 S-Video outputs on it. So it's really nice to split to multiple TVs and also just your capture cards or whatever. So you can do 1 to 3 with that. So that's pretty much it for kind of the entry level splitters, I guess. So I guess we'll move on and talk about VCRs next. Okay, so here we have a JVC HRS3600U VCR. This is one that I've had for several years. What's nice about this one is that it does have some S-Video inputs and outputs on the back of it. So it's got an S-Video in here and then an S-Video out here. It also has the yellow, white, and red in and out as well, so you can do composite video with it. It also has coax, like you would expect a VCR to have for TV out and then antenna in. So you can do some different things with coax. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. This particular model of VCR, there is kind of, I guess, a higher, quote-unquote, higher-end one. If you want to get S-Video in the front, that model number is HRS4600U. That comes with the S-Video port in the front that you can use. But you can use VCRs to kind of in an indirect way split video. and it's lagless too, which is nice. So you don't have to worry about any input lag that's inherent, except what's on your TV or your or anything like that. So it's basically lagless. So you can plug in your console into a VCR and then use something like the coax out to go to your CRT TV, your retro gaming TV, or you can use like the S-Video out to go into your PVM or something like that if you need to. So you can use these to be lagless, and then if you use something like coax to connect it to your TV, then you can run the S-Video out to your capture card or something like that if you use like the Elgato HD to capture older retro games. And we'll talk about capture cards in the next video. But anyway, you could use something like the Elgato HD to capture that, or you can use like the FrameMeister patch through to something else. So just any HDMI type of capture card, because there's so many options. I'm only going to cover a couple because those are the ones that I have, and just kind of the way to get set up to run on any capture card, because that would just be a little bit easier for you since there's so many options. So anyway, so this is a pretty nice VCR. Just if you're looking to capture retro games in pretty high quality, using something like S-Video, using a VCR is generally a good idea because there's not too many options anymore for capturing things on S-Video. You either have to use composite video, which when we talk about the FrameMeister, I'll show you the difference between the quality. Composite isn't as good as S-Video is, and then there's component, but again, you can't really get a VCR that has component inputs or outputs on it, because that was kind of when DVD players came into being. You could do DVD recorders had component in and out. The thing about DVD recorders, though, is if you're trying to play directly on it, it's going to be laggy, like really laggy, about 2 seconds worth of lag on at least the one that I have that I tried. I don't have hardly any options to try that, but I did have a DVD recorder, and it produced about 2 seconds worth of lag, which is unfortunate. So you can play on those and capture things off of them, but again, the colors are going to be off, and it's just, I guess, overall better if you're going to do retro games to either do composite or S-Video rather than messing around with component, because then you kind of get into a realm of needing either like HD CRTs, which are really, really heavy and sometimes difficult to come by, and just, I don't know, they're just not very practical, I guess. So I just use a normal retro CRT that does composite and coax, and then I just have my PVM for something that's a little bit higher quality. And that's what I would suggest you do anyway. If you're thinking about doing component inputs, just look for a PVM that's got YPVPR and just make it easier on yourself. So with that, I guess let's go ahead and get set up so that I can show you some basic things about splitting using these little entry-level methods, as well as connecting to a VCR with some coax to just an old CRT TV. If you just have one that just has coax, then this should be a good option for you. So I guess let's look at that next. Okay, so got our two TVs here. So this is my Philips Magnavox TV and then my Sony PVM over here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to walk through the basic splitting options. So the first one is this single input to double output RCA. So what you're going to do if you want to split video this way, got my composite cables here. So if you want to split video this way, this is really easy. So all you do is you take your console, the yellow adapter here, you plug it into this end, like this. And then you take the two composite cables, plug one into one side, I hate cables. They tangle up on themselves. It's really annoying. Okay, there we go. Okay, so you plug one into one end, and then you plug the other into the other end. Then you plug these into your TVs, monitors, or what have you, or split it into your one into your TV and one into your capture card or something like that. So we just plug this into composite input on here, and the composite input on here. Turn these on. And then for this TV, we need to make sure that it's on the aux connection. Turn it on. And there you go. You have video on 2 TVs now. So the color is slightly different, just because each TV renders color slightly differently. But anyway, there you go. So now you have your game console on 2 different TVs. So you can also accomplish the same thing using a VCR. So we'll go ahead and do that here, and then we'll be right back with that. All right, so next we have the VCR that we're going to use to connect to both of these TVs. So I've swapped the order around, or the TVs around, so that it'd make it a little bit easier to fiddle around with all of this stuff. So anyway, so we have a coax cable connected to the TV out option. So you have this coax cable here. And by the way, coax, the adapter for it, or I guess the port that it uses, the one that you kind of screw into place, is also called an F-type adapter as well. So so just a little side note on what that's called, because you might come across that at some point or another. So that's called an F-type adapter. So anyway, we're going to take the coax cable and we're going to put it into the F-type adapter on the back of the CRT over here. And then on the back of the VCR, we have the console plugged into the composite in, and then we have just another RCA cable connected into the composite out, and then we just stick that into the composite in on this TV. Okay, and so the TV, if you're going to use coax, it needs to be set to channel 3, which is the snowing channel or the ants moving channel or whatever you want to call that channel. And then we're going to power on the VCR. And then on the VCR, it has a TV VCR setting. So you click that and it'll turn on. And the PVM recognizes it as well. So then after that, we need to select what channel we want to be on. So in the case of this VCR, we want to be on line 1. And then we power it on. And we get a picture. And as you can see, in comparison to the previous video where we used the RCA splitters, the picture on this TV is a little bit brighter now. So you can see how the RCA adapters, for whatever reason, cause strange colors to, or just darkening effects to happen on the screen or whatever. So anyway, there's that option where you can use it to route through a VCR. And I thought this was kind of interesting because, in a sense, you can use the coax as a free splitting tool, and then just use the output from the VCR that it already has to another source, whether it be another TV or your capture card or something like that. So you don't have to worry about taking up an extra input because the coax is, in a sense, just a pass-through. So that makes that a lot easier to split signals around from one place to another just using a VCR. And in some cases as well, if you have consoles that only support RF, if you have like an NES that only runs on RF, or if you have a Sega Genesis like I did, the Model 2 only came with an RF adapter, so you just plug that into the RF adapter and then you can output to your capture card. That's what we did with the Radical Rex video for the Dream Marathon, is we plugged in RF into a VCR and then split it out. The only thing that happens though is when you use RF and then split it out to something like S-Video, it does clean up the image a little bit, but the problem is you get kind of this weird rainbow effect kind of throughout the screen. So that's kind of the one downfall to doing it that way, is you get kind of some artifacts as a result of switching the signal around that way. But it is a viable option if you want to do that instead. And I find that VCRs, just having them around, are really useful for various types of things with retro games. So they let you split things around and just hook up old consoles that you might not have any other adapter for if you haven't kind of gone through the operation of modding them, or kind of just like making them current. So VCRs are really helpful to have around. So that's the second example of how you can split video around and send it to your capture card, because if you use the coax, you can still have lagless input from the VCR to your TV, and then capture it on a capture card and not have to worry about any lag or input latency or this kind of thing, because it'll just be a straight pass through from the VCR to your TV and then to the capture card, which may or may not have different types of lag associated with it. So it does make it really nice for capturing at an entry level if you hook up a VCR to a retro CRT and just run your capture that way. It makes it really, really easy. So anyway, the next thing that we're going to talk about is updating the video quality and going from Composite to S-Video. So pretty similar setup here to what we had before with Composite. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect our console using S-Video. So what's nice is that the SNES can be run using S-Video. You can use the same exact cable for the N64 and the GameCube as well. So if you don't want to mess around with component on the GameCube because it's really expensive, you can use S-Video and get a pretty good result out of it. So we're just going to use this SNES S-Video cable, and we're going to plug it into the input on the S-Video input on the VCR, and then we're going to take the S-Video output and we're going to attach that to our secondary source over here. And we're still going to run the splitting using coax to this TV over here, just to make things easy. And with this VCR in particular, you need to specifically select in the menu that you want to use S-Video on the back. So we go into Function Set, and then we scroll down to Next Page. And then when it says Rear Aux Input, we need to select S-Video and then say OK. And then say Menu to get back out of it. And then once that's selected, then you can power it on, and you'll get an S-Video signal out of the console. So pretty similar setup, just using S-Video cables instead of composite cables, and you get the pretty much the same results. So pretty easy there. So next we're going to talk about this Extron distribution amplifier. Pretty much the same setup, but using a different piece of equipment. So we'll talk about that now. So now we have the console hooked up to the Extron distribution amplifier. So we have the console going into the input of the distribution amplifier over here. And then we have two separate outputs. So we have one output going to the PVM, and then in this other one we have it going into the VCR and then using the coax as a pass-through to this TV. So if we turn the console on now, get a picture on both screens. And again, the video quality is the same. This is just another way to run your video. And you can also use this distribution amplifier to run, say, into your PVM and then into your capture device or whatever you need to do there, your secondary source. So you can just use this little distribution amplifier. You can even add in a third connection if you want to. Like I said earlier, it's got 3 outputs. So you could, if you're wanting to play games and look at 2 different screens, or look at, have each person looking at a different screen, but it still be kind of the same picture. You can run one input in here and then run an output to one TV, an output to another TV, and then the third output can go to your capture device, so that you guys aren't like crowding around one TV or this kind of thing and straining yourself. You can sit back and kind of look at your own screen. Each person can look at their own screen, and then you can run the third output to your capture device. So that's another option for running S-Video inputs. Again, you can use the S-Video connection from the SNES on the N64 and the GameCube as well. So this is if you want to capture those consoles in a little bit higher quality. Okay, now lastly we have this Extron matrix switcher. It's an Extron Crosspoint series. It's a 300, I believe, and it has 8 inputs and 8 outputs. It does have buttons for 12 inputs, but if we take a look on the back, there's 4 slots that are missing here. But anyway, this is a BNC matrix switcher that has RGB, HV, and then it also has the Phoenix down here at the bottom, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So you can put 8 inputs and then switch that to potentially 8 outputs. So each input can go to 8 outputs potentially. So you can put this to like 8 TVs, 8 monitors, 8 just different inputs, I guess. You can put this to 8 different places. And one thing that is interesting about these Extron Crosspoint matrix switchers is that you can run Composite, S-Video, Component, and RGB all out of them. You have to, if you want to use any type of input, whether it's Composite to RGB, it doesn't matter. You can only do 1-to-1. So whatever's in input 1, that has to be matched on any of the other outputs. So it has to be RGBS, Composite, Component, whatever. It's got to all match. So it's a 1-to-1 input output. So what you get in is what you put out. So that was one thing that I thought you might be able to mess around with, but you can't. So you have to do Composite in and Composite out, or Component in and Component out. That's all you have the option to do there. But what's interesting is you can run, if you want to run Composite, all you have to do is just attach the BNC cable to the top plug, and then put it to the top plug on the output, and you're done. You can run Composite video. If you do S-Video, what you have to do is you have to do Y and then C, so you can do the luminance and chrominance. So you use the top 2, and there's special adapters for those where it does BNC to like an S-Video female or something like that. Excuse me. But I don't have one of those to demonstrate or to show you, I guess. But you can buy those. They're pretty rare and hard to find. The one that I found was by Osprey, I think was the name of the company. So Osprey. So you can attach luminance and chrominance and then just attach your S-Video cable in that way. I didn't want to go down that route because since they were kind of expensive and rare, I just went with using the little Extron S-Video distribution matrix, because then I didn't have to convert BNC to S-Video. It just already had S-Video as its default connection. So then if you want to do Component, then you would just do YPBPR and run it that way. So you'd use the top 3. And then depending on what type of PVM you have, if you use one that has RGB HV, you would have to use all 5 of these plugs. But if you're just using RGBS, the H plug also works as H/HV as well, or RGBS. So it can be H, HV, or S. So you can run 4 cables into that. And then on the other side of it, you would just output 4 or 5, depending on your PVM and setup. So this plug down here is called Phoenix, and it's used for audio. So there's a couple of options you can get. for switching audio around. The one that I use is from retrogamingcables.co.uk. They kind of specialize in just various types of cables or equipment or this kind of thing that you can use for your retro games. So this is what it looks like. It's got a little blue PCB on the bottom, and then it's got the Phoenix connector on the back, and then it has white and red RCA on the front. And the blue one, you have to buy these kind of pre-configured. So the blue ones, at least at the time of this video, are used for input. And then there's some red ones that are used for output. And it actually says output written on the bottom down here, but you probably can't see that because of the video. But anyway, so these can be plugged in to the Phoenix port on the back. So if we do the input here, so we just attach that here. And there you go. Then you have audio that you can mess around with. And then same for the outputs as well. So you just attach that, and there you go. The one thing about this Extron in particular, there's different kind of variations of it, and you just kind of have to look around to see what variations you're going to get when you order it. This one was actually available here in town, so that's why I went with this one. But the one thing that's kind of weird is that the Phoenix connector, since they stick up a little bit for audio, it kind of blocks this V connection down here. I don't use it, so it kind of works out that I can just just get this nudged underneath here and just use it to brace the connection or whatever. But other models have a bigger space down here at the bottom that you can fit this into without impinging on the V connection. So, but that's just mine. But there are other models you can look into. They really get ridiculous where you can do like 32 in or 32 out. You know, they're just absolutely huge matrix switchers if you need such a thing. But it seems like the common ones are 4, 8, or 16. So you can do that. But anyway, you can attach like different types of cables to these. Like this is the 21 pin RGB breakout cable from Wookieewin that I talked about in the last video. And so this is pretty much the same as the PVM from the last video. All you do is you take the different colors, the red, green, and blue, and then the SYNC, and you plug them into the appropriate sockets on here. So so for this one, again, you just kind of look for the slip, you plug it in, and then you turn it. So you do R, and then G, and then B, and then S or HV, depending on the type of connection that you have. And then you just take the little 2 audio connectors on this end that come with the cable, and you plug them into the red and white connections. So then you would just hook up your retro console to this end, and then you would run it that way. I kind of mentioned in the last video as well that you can kind of make your own BNC cables. So what I did was I just took 4 yellow RCA cables because I had them, and I attached little RCA to BNC adapters on the end of it, on both ends of it, and then that way I can use that as an output to my PVM from the back of this matrix switcher. So you just attach in these cables like you would any other normal BNC cable, and just run your video that way. So and then you would obviously hook up audio in any way that you needed to. So you can run things that way. It's really convenient and really easy to run things this way because you don't necessarily need specific BNC cables to run your output or your input or whatever. You can just run just normal RCA cables because, again, it's just looking for the signal on the wire. And then if you just buy these specialty cables and plug them in, and then plug your retro consoles into that. You can get your signal run out that way. These BNC breakout cables, I didn't mention this last time, they cost somewhere between $35 and $50. So if you have multiple consoles that you're wanting to connect into this matrix switcher and then send it to your PVM or whatever other equipment you use for that, it can get kind of pricey. So I only have one, and then I just plug in whatever console I need to and switch things around that way. So I don't have a lot of these cables. I only had one, but I mainly use this matrix switcher for when we're doing like marathon runs or just kind of streamlining my setup to make things easier to get everything plugged into and output to the right sources and this kind of thing, so that I can just leave everything set up and don't have to worry about switching anything aside from the consoles. So it's really convenient. I really like them. They're on eBay right now for really cheap. You can usually get them from somewhere between $50 and $100 as of this video. So they're really nice. They're really easy to use. If you look, if we turn this back around and you just kind of look at the front panel that it has on here, it's really straightforward. You have you select your input, and then you select whatever outputs you want down here, and then you hit enter, and it sends it to those specific inputs or outputs. There's a preset button. I haven't messed around with that, so I can't really tell you too much about what that's about. There's a view button where you can see what outputs are available for you to send signals to. So this is just saying what inputs and outputs, or what outputs are open, excuse me. And then you can use the escape button to get out of that. It also has some I/O for RGBHV and for audio that you can toggle on and off if you need specific functionality turned on or off. So since I switch audio and I have RGBHV, I just go ahead and just leave it on. That way I don't have any problems with any signal or this kind of thing. So anyway, they're really easy to use. Again, you just select what input you want. So if you have like your SNES on input 2 and you want to send that to your TV or your capture card or something that's on input 5, you just do that. The light starts blinking and then you hit enter and it's selected. So it's really easy to use, and getting cables for it is not terribly expensive. If you want specialized BNC cables that aren't like janky like this one or made up or whatever, you can get them for about $17 or $20, I guess. It kind of depends on where you look. So anyway, that's that. So I'll give just a quick example of how to use the Extron Crosspoint with my PVM. So for the last example here, so I've got my PVM turned on, the Extron's plugged in. I've got my RGB cables, and again, remember, if you're using SCART or JP21, don't mix and match the standards because they're not wired up the same way. And also make sure your equipment, your consoles specifically, are powered off before you plug in the RGB cables, because they carry some amount of power with them, and you can ruin your equipment potentially if they're on when you're plugging and unplugging things. So, and then always make sure to get your BNC cables lined up for the right colors, because if they're not, you'll get some weird results on the colors like you saw last time. So just always make sure that you get things plugged in. So, but anyway, so we have input 1 over here is going to output 1, which is to my PVM over here. And so you can kind of toggle things on and off, and the signal goes to various sources. So it's really easy to just turn it on and then hit enter, and your signal is right there. So so that's it for the Extron Crosspoint. I really like it. It's really easy to use. It's really straightforward. They're really cheap. So if you're in RGB or this kind of thing, using one of these Extron Crosspoints is really nice. It really simplifies things and really makes things easy. So so I really like it, and I'm a big fan of them. So anyway, so that's pretty much it for switchers. So we'll kind of finalize with some closing thoughts. One final item I wanted to mention about these Extron Crosspoint units is that for the sync signal, they can only take a CSYNC signal. So if you're using equipment or consoles that are using sync on Luma or sync on Composite or this kind of thing, they won't work properly. You can only use CSYNC cables with these Extron units. So you either need to get like a sync stripping circuit inside of the cable from your console, or you need to just use like a sync strike or something like that before you connect to it. So I just wanted to kind of point that out as a side note, that you really do need CSYNC cables in order to make the Extron Crosspoints work properly with your equipment. So that pretty much covers everything that I wanted to for this video. So again, this was talking about splitters, going from the really simple up to kind of the really complex and involved. So I hope you like the video. If you do, that's great. I think the next one that we're going to do is talking about capture cards and the FrameMeister a little bit, so that you can kind of get familiar with how to record your retro games in varying degrees of quality, and that way you can kind of see the comparison between composite, S-video, RF, component, and RGB. And so we'll go from there. But I really appreciate you guys watching the videos. And if you have any questions, again, leave a comment down in the comment section, and I'll do my best to answer it and try and clarify any points that aren't really clear or anything. But anyway, thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time.